Earth's last defender fell for the Alien Empress, a forbidden love that could end humanity. The city was silent, covered in smoke and dust. Buildings stood broken like bones of a fallen giant. Streets were empty, except for the ruins of machines that once defended Earth. Humanity had lost almost everything, and yet one man still walked among the ruins. He was the last soldier of Earth, the last defender who had not surrendered when the world fell. His steps were heavy, but his eyes carried the fire of a man who refused to bow. The war had been long and merciless. The alien empire had come without warning, with ships larger than mountains and weapons brighter than suns. They had cut through Earth's armies as if they were made of paper. The oceans boiled under their fire and the skies burned red for weeks. Entire nations disappeared in hours, cities erased in seconds. Humanity had fought bravely, but courage was no shield against such power. One by one, the strongholds fell until Earth was nothing but scattered survivors hiding in shadows. Yet this soldier did not give up. His name was whispered among the last survivors, though most never saw him. They called him the Ghost of Earth. He would appear in the middle of a battlefield, destroy enemy patrols, and vanish again. No one knew how he survived when everyone else was crushed. Some said fate protected him. Others believed he was already dead, a spirit haunting the aliens who had taken everything. But he was real, and he was the last symbol of human defiance. One night, when the sky was lit with the glow of alien ships moving above the clouds, the soldier stood on a broken bridge. He watched them with calm hatred. His rifle was heavy, scarred from battles but still loaded. He had no allies, no army, and no command left to obey. He had only his mission: fight until there was nothing left. As he prepared to strike another alien patrol, something unusual happened. A strange silence fell over the air. The usual sound of machines was gone. Instead, he felt as if someone was watching him. From the shadows of the ruins, a figure appeared. She was tall, wrapped in flowing silver armor that shimmered in the dark. Her presence was not like the others. She did not move with the cold precision of soldiers. She carried herself like royalty. The soldier raised his weapon instantly. His finger tightened on the trigger. But she did not raise a weapon. She only looked at him, her eyes glowing faintly with a light that was not human. He recognized her from the images shown to the Resistance long ago. She was the Empress of the Alien Empire, the one who had commanded the destruction of his world. To see her here alone was impossible. It had to be a trap. His heart pounded. His mind screamed to pull the trigger, to end the war with one shot. But something stopped him. She did not move, did not command, did not threaten. She simply stood there as if she wanted him to look into her eyes. For a long moment, the ruins around them disappeared. It was only him and her, the last soldier of Earth and the ruler of the enemy. She spoke, and her voice was not harsh. It was soft, almost human, carrying sadness hidden behind pride. She told him that she knew who he was. She had heard the whispers of the Ghost of Earth. She said he was unlike the others, that his spirit burned stronger than any weapon they had destroyed. She said she came not as a conqueror, but as a woman who wanted to understand why he still fought when the world was already lost. The soldier did not answer. He had no words for her. His fingers still rested on the trigger, but his eyes narrowed with doubt. He wondered if this was another trick, a new kind of weapon. Yet something about her felt different from the monsters he had fought. Her gaze did not hold cruelty. It held something he had not seen in years, and curiosity. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Around them, the broken city seemed to hold its breath. If the soldier killed her now, perhaps the war would change. Perhaps Earth would have a chance. But in that moment, he realized something terrifying. His hands were steady. His rifle aimed true, but his heart was no longer certain. He was the last soldier, but for the first time he hesitated. The Empress took one step closer. Her words were careful, almost fragile. She said she did not come with guards because they would never allow her to do what she was about to do. She said she wanted to see him not as an enemy, but as a man. She said there was more to the war than he knew. The soldier's breath grew heavy. His life had been simple: fight, kill, survive. But now in front of him stood the very person who had the power to end him in an instant, and yet she chose not to. He felt the ground shift beneath his feet, as if the war itself had changed in that single moment. Above them, the alien ships moved across the sky like dark stars. The world was broken. Humanity was nearly gone. And yet here in the ruins, the last defender of Earth and the empress of its conquerors faced each other not with blades but with silence. Something was beginning, something forbidden, and deep inside the soldier knew his life would never be the same again. The night was colder than before, and the ruins around him seemed even more lifeless. The soldier did not sleep after his meeting with the Empress. Her image haunted his mind. The glow in her eyes, the way her voice carried sorrow instead of cruelty. He had fought her kind for years, seen them burn cities, watched them slaughter his people. Yet when he had faced her, something inside him had cracked. He could not understand it. He should have killed her. He had wanted to, and yet he had not. Days passed and he returned to his silent war. He destroyed alien patrols, rescued small groups of survivors, and moved through shadows like a ghost. But the memory of that night did not fade. He told himself it was weakness, that she had tricked him. He told himself that if he saw her again, he would not hesitate. Still, in the darkest hours of the night, he remembered her words, and they felt heavier than any weapon. Then it happened again. On a ruined battlefield filled with broken tanks and ash, he found her waiting for him. She stood where the dead lay unburied, untouched by the stench of war. Her silver armor shone faintly under the moonlight, as if she carried her own light into the darkness. He raised his rifle at once, but she did not move. She looked at him with the same calm as before, and for a moment the soldier felt he was caught in a dream. This time she spoke longer. She told him she had watched the humans closely. She had seen their bravery, their desperation, their anger. She said she had been taught to see them as weak, as nothing more than animals fighting against the inevitable. But when she looked at him, she could not believe that. His defiance made no sense to her. Why fight when there was no hope? Why stand alone against an empire that had destroyed entire worlds? She said she needed to know what gave him strength. The soldier answered at last, his voice rough from years of silence. He told her that hope was not something given. It was something made. Humanity had no empire, no fleets, no great power, but it had people who refused to bow. He said he fought because surrender was worse than death, because even if the world was gone, the spirit of mankind still lived through him. For the first time, the Empress lowered her gaze. Her shoulders trembled, almost too small for him to notice. She said she had never heard such words before. In her empire, there was only order and obedience. Defiance was crushed. Resistance was unthinkable. And yet she stood before the one man who embodied it. She admitted she admired him, though she did not understand why. The soldier tightened his grip on his weapon. Admiration from her lips felt like poison. She was his enemy. He could not forget the burning skies, the screams, the endless graves. Still, the way she spoke, the way her voice trembled, it did not sound like the voice of a ruler who had ordered slaughter. It sounded like someone searching for something she herself had lost. They stood in silence again, their eyes locked across the ruins. Around them the wind whispered through broken steel, carrying the voices of the dead. The soldier thought of his comrades, the friends he had buried, the family he had lost. His hatred burned inside him, but it was tangled with something new, something dangerous. Curiosity. The Empress moved closer. Every step she took was slow, deliberate, as if she knew one wrong move would mean her death. She stopped only a few feet away, her presence overwhelming. The soldier could see the faint glow of her skin, could hear the strange rhythm of her breath. She was not human, and yet in that moment she felt closer to him than the ashes of his own kind. She asked him a question then, one he did not expect. She asked if he hated her. The soldier's eyes hardened. He told her yes, he hated her with every piece of his soul. She nodded as if she had expected it. Then she asked if hate was the only thing he felt when he looked at her. He opened his mouth to answer, but no words came. His silence was more dangerous than any reply. In that silence, something shifted. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly as she lifted it toward him. For a moment it seemed as if she would touch his face, but she stopped just short. The air between them felt alive, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The soldier's chest rose and fell, his finger still on the trigger, his mind torn between pulling it and lowering it. Above them, a patrol ship passed, its light sweeping across the ruins. Instantly, the Empress pulled back, her eyes hardening. She told him this meeting could not be known. If her people discovered she had sought him out, she would be seen as a traitor. If his people knew, he would be branded a betrayer too. What lay between them was forbidden, impossible. And yet she had come again, and she promised she would return once more. The soldier stood frozen as she vanished into the night. His rifle remained heavy in his hands, but his heart was heavier. He told himself he would not go to her again, that the next time he saw her he would not hesitate. But deep inside, beneath the weight of his rage, another truth had begun to grow. He was not only fighting a war of survival, he was fighting a war inside his own heart. The ruins of Earth stretched endlessly around him, the stars above shining cold and distant. Humanity's last defender walked alone once more, but he was no longer the same. A seed had been planted in the ashes, a dangerous seed that could change everything. The soldier moved like a shadow through the broken streets, but inside him a storm had begun. Each step echoed with conflict, each breath carried a question he could not silence. He had met her twice, the Empress of the Empire that had destroyed his world, and both times he had failed to do what he should have done. His duty was clear: she was the enemy, and her death could mean hope for his people. Yet when he looked into her eyes, he had seen something more than power. He had seen doubt, fear, and something that reminded him of the humanity he thought was gone. He told himself it was weakness. He told himself he was slipping. But no matter how hard he tried to bury the memory, it grew inside him like fire. At night, when he tried to rest, he dreamed of her silver armor gleaming in the ruins, of her voice asking questions no enemy should ask. When he woke, he hated himself for it. He had sworn to protect Earth, and now his thoughts betrayed him. One evening, he stumbled upon a group of survivors hiding in the basement of a ruined library. They looked at him as if he were a savior, their eyes filled with desperation. They asked if there was still hope, if Earth could still rise against the Empire. The soldier gave them strength with his words, telling them humanity would never fall, that the spirit of resistance burned brighter than any star. But as he spoke, a part of him felt hollow. For even as he promised them freedom, his heart whispered of the Empress. He was their last defender, their last hope, and yet his loyalty was no longer whole. Days later, she returned again. This time she found him by the shore of a shattered ocean, where the waves crashed against wreckage of ships that once tried to defend Earth. The moonlight fell across her face, and for a moment she looked less like a ruler and more like a woman carrying the weight of worlds. He raised his weapon as always, but his arms felt heavier than before. She asked him why he fought alone when his people had already given up. He told her that surrender was a disease and he would never carry it. She asked if he had ever thought of peace, of ending the cycle of blood. He told her peace was a word carved on graves. They stared at each other, their voices sharp. Yet beneath the sharpness was something deeper, something fragile. The soldier realized then that she was not his only enemy. His own heart had become one too. Each time she spoke, he felt the line between duty and desire blur. He wanted to hate her, to crush the strange bond that grew between them. But when she turned away, he felt emptier than the ruins around him. One night, after she vanished again, he sat alone by the fire of a broken tank. The flames reflected in his eyes as he thought of what would happen if anyone discovered the truth. If the resistance learned that their last soldier met with the Empress, they would call him traitor. They would spit on his name, curse him, and perhaps even hunt him down. If the Empire learned of her visits, she would be executed, stripped of her throne, remembered not as a ruler but as a disgrace. What bound them was more dangerous than any battle. And yet the meetings continued. At times they spoke in whispers under broken towers. At times they simply stood in silence, the air between them charged with unspoken words. She began to share fragments of her truth. She told him of her people, how her council thirsted for war, how her generals would never stop until Earth was erased. She admitted she did not want endless blood, but to defy them was to risk her life. He listened with suspicion, but also with something else. He began to believe her. Still, his hands were stained with blood, and every day he fought alien patrols, killing those she ruled. His rifle sang the song of defiance, and the ground was painted with war. Between these two worlds he lived, a soldier of Earth by day and a man of forbidden longing by night. One evening he found himself watching her more closely than he should. He noticed the way her eyes softened when she spoke of stars, the way her voice grew quieter when she spoke of loss. She was no longer a faceless enemy in a distant throne. She was real, and that made her more dangerous than any weapon. When their hands almost touched again, the soldier pulled back with fury. He shouted at her, asking why she tempted him, why she risked everything for these secret meetings. she answered simply, her words shaking in the night air. She said she had seen countless battles, endless wars, and billions of lives lost. Yet in him she saw something she had never seen before, a fire that even empires could not crush. She said she wanted to understand it and perhaps even share it. The soldier's chest ached with anger and longing. He wanted to believe her, and that was the most dangerous thing of all. He turned away, gripping his weapon, whispering to himself that he was Earth's last defender, not a man who could fall for his enemy. But when he looked at her one last time, he knew his whisper was a lie. As she disappeared into the shadows once more, the soldier remained alone, torn between two worlds. His duty screamed at him to stay loyal to Earth, but his heart whispered of a future that had no place in war. He was the last soldier, and now he carried a burden heavier than survival. He carried desire, forbidden and fragile, a desire that could end humanity itself. The soldier knew it could not last forever. The secret meetings were dangerous, and danger always found a way to the surface. For weeks he had walked between two lives. The fighter who carried humanity's last hope and the man who stood in silence with the Empress under broken skies. But every step forward brought the shadows closer, and soon the shadows opened their eyes. One night, after destroying a patrol, he returned to the hidden shelter of survivors he had been protecting. The moment he entered, he felt their stares burn through him. They did not cheer for him as before, nor did they look at him as their savior. Their faces were twisted with suspicion, their voices low and sharp. A young man stepped forward, his hands shaking but his eyes hard. He asked why the last soldier of Earth was seen standing with the enemy queen. The words struck like thunder. The soldier froze, his jaw tightening. Someone had followed him. Someone had seen what no one should have seen. He searched their faces and found only doubt, only fear. To them, he was no longer the ghost of Earth. To them, he was something worse. A traitor. He tried to speak, but his words fell heavy. He told them it was not what they thought, that his mission had not changed, that he still fought for them. But the seed of betrayal had already been planted, and their silence told him it had grown roots. Mothers clutched their children closer. Men whispered curses, and the trust that had carried them all this time slipped away like smoke. Far above, in the alien fleet that circled Earth, whispers also began. The Empress's generals grew restless. They saw her disappear too often, vanish from her throne when she was needed. They did not yet know where she went, but their suspicion was strong. They whispered among themselves that their ruler was no longer loyal to the Empire's purpose. And in the darkness of their council, betrayal stirred like a serpent. The next time the soldier met her, he carried the weight of both worlds on his shoulders. He found her by the ruins of an old cathedral, its shattered glass windows glowing under the moonlight. She stood alone as always, but this time her face was different. There was fear in her eyes, though she tried to hide it. She told him her generals were watching her more closely. She said if they discovered the truth, she would be executed. He wanted to tell her to stop, to end this madness before it destroyed them both, but the words died in his throat. Instead, he demanded the truth. He asked why the Empress of an empire would risk everything to meet the enemy of her people. For a long time, she said nothing. Then she lowered her gaze, her voice trembling. She told him the war was never hers. The empire had been built on conquest long before her birth. She had inherited a throne drowned in blood. The generals had power greater than her own, and though she was their ruler in name, in truth she was a prisoner of tradition. Her crown was heavy, but her chains were heavier. The soldier stood silent, his rifle hanging at his side. Her words cut deeper than any blade. All this time he had thought of her as the monster who destroyed his world, yet now she revealed herself as something else, a prisoner of her own empire. She told him she admired him not because he fought, but because he chose to fight. He had a freedom she had never known, even as Queen of the Stars. But the revelation was poisoned with danger, for as they spoke, shadows moved in the ruins. A group of human survivors had followed him, determined to see if the rumors were true. They hid behind broken walls, their hearts filled with rage as they watched their last hope stand beside their greatest enemy. To them, there was no truth in her words, only betrayal. When the soldier realized they had been discovered, it was already too late. The survivors shouted curses and raised their weapons. The Empress stepped back, her armor glowing in defense. The soldier stood between them, his heart torn. He begged the survivors to stop, but their voices drowned him. They called him traitor, accused him of selling Earth to the very queen who burned it. Their eyes no longer saw a hero. They saw only a man corrupted by forbidden desire. The Empress's face hardened, her sorrow replaced by cold fear. She told him this could not continue. Every moment they shared pulled them closer to ruin. Her generals hunted her, his people rejected him, and yet she could not stay away. She whispered to him that something greater was coming, a storm that would end not just Earth but her throne as well. The truth, she said, would destroy them both. As she vanished once more into the night, the soldier stood in the ruins, surrounded by the fury of his own people. They no longer wanted his protection. They no longer wanted his hope. In their eyes, his love had killed his loyalty. He walked away, their voices echoing behind him like knives in his back. Above, in the Empire's flagship, the generals spoke openly of betrayal. They had seen the Empress's weakness, and weakness could not rule. They began to plan her fall, not knowing that her secret meetings were the very proof they sought. She was no longer untouchable. Her crown was bleeding. The soldier wandered into the wasteland, his heart heavier than ever. He had carried the weight of survival for so long, but now he carried something greater. The knowledge that he had betrayed the trust of his people, and the suspicion that he had doomed the only woman who had seen him as more than a ghost of war. He was no longer only the last soldier. He was the traitor of Earth and the shadow of an empire's queen, and yet beneath all the ruin a spark of truth burned inside him. Her words about the war, about her chains, about her hidden sorrow, they were real. He had seen it in her eyes, but truth alone could not save them. Truth had already begun to destroy everything. The war reached its final stage. The sky was crowded with alien warships, their engines burning like a second sun above the ruins of Earth. The ground trembled as their weapons prepared for the last strike, the one that would erase whatever remained of humanity. In hidden shelters, the few survivors prayed for a miracle. But their hope no longer rested on armies or weapons. It rested on one man, the last soldier, who walked alone through the smoke of his dying world. He carried no banner, no orders, and no allies. He carried only his rifle and the heavy burden of his heart. His people no longer trusted him. The whispers of betrayal followed him wherever he went. The survivors spat his name, saying he had chosen the enemy queen over them. Yet still he fought, not for their faith but for something deeper. A promise he had made to himself long ago, to never bow until his last breath. The Empress appeared once more, not in secret but in the heart of the battlefield. Her silver armor shone against the flames, her presence undeniable even among thousands of her soldiers. She had come not as a shadow but as herself, standing before the last defender of Earth. Around them, both humans and aliens froze, the air heavy with disbelief. It was as if the war itself had paused to witness what would happen. Her generals shouted for her to return to the safety of the fleet. Human survivors cried for the soldier to kill her where she stood. Both sides demanded blood, but she raised her hand, silencing her army, and he raised his rifle, steady but uncertain. Their eyes locked, and in that gaze lay the weight of two worlds. She spoke, her voice carrying across the battlefield like a blade of sorrow. She revealed the truth she had hidden for so long. The war had never been her choice. It was her council that demanded conquest, her generals who thrived on blood. She had worn the crown, but the crown was a prison. She told them she had seen enough death, enough ruin. She wanted peace, not ashes. And then she looked at him, telling all who listened that the only reason she still believed in such a dream was because of the man who had never surrendered. The world grew still. The soldiers of the Empire murmured in confusion. The survivors of Earth watched with burning eyes. And the last soldier felt the Earth itself tilt beneath him. He was torn apart by the choice before him. His duty screamed for him to pull the trigger, to end her life and deliver vengeance to his people. But his heart whispered that in her voice lay the only chance to end the war, the only chance for peace. His finger rested on the trigger. Every scar on his body reminded him of what her empire had taken. Every memory of the dead urged him to fire. But then he remembered her eyes, the way they had softened when she spoke of freedom, the way her voice trembled when she admitted her chains. She was not the monster he had imagined, not the tyrant of his nightmares. She was something far more dangerous, a woman who carried both the power to destroy and the hope to change. The generals saw his hesitation and roared for her death. They drew their weapons, ready to cut her down and crush the last spark of peace. The survivors, too, screamed at him, demanding vengeance, demanding blood. He stood in the center, caught between two storms. His body was steady, but his soul was breaking. He knew that whatever choice he made would decide the fate of both worlds. At last, he lowered his rifle. Gasps erupted from both sides. He did not kneel, he did not surrender, but he chose not to kill. He chose to believe her. The Empress stepped forward, her eyes burning with gratitude and fear. She declared that the war was over, not by the will of her generals, but by her own. She said she would end the bloodshed, even if it cost her the throne, even if it cost her life. Chaos followed. Her generals turned their weapons on her, but the soldiers stood at her side. For the first time, the last soldier of Earth fought not against her people, but for her. He raised his rifle and fired, cutting down those who threatened her. Together they stood back to back in the ruins, human and alien, soldier and queen, fighting not for conquest, but for survival of a new truth. The battle raged, but their defiance spread like fire. Some alien soldiers, seeing their Empress risk everything, lowered their weapons. Some humans, seeing their last defender protect her, hesitated in their anger. The battlefield became a storm of betrayal and revelation, a storm that no longer belonged to war alone, but to the choice of two hearts. By the end, the field was littered with the dead of both sides. The generals who opposed her lay fallen, but the cost was terrible. The survivors of Earth looked at their soldier with hollow eyes, uncertain if he had saved them or doomed them. The alien empire shook with doubt, its future broken by its own ruler's defiance. And in the silence after the storm, the Empress and the last soldier stood together, blood on their hands, sorrow in their eyes. She whispered that this was only the beginning, that her choice would ignite fires across the empire. He looked at her, his face torn between hope and grief, and said nothing. The sky above was still filled with warships, the ground still broken, the world still dying. Nothing was healed. Nothing was certain. And yet, in the ruins of the final battle, two enemies stood as one, bound not by duty or by conquest, but by a love so forbidden it could either save what remained of humanity or end it forever.